We're here, we're queer, and we will continue to change the world. Welcome to Queer Changemakers. I'm your host, Justin Mezzapin, pronouns he, him, and each episode will share stories of LGBTQ plus individuals who are taking action to make a difference in our communities and beyond. Welcome to another episode of Queer Changemakers. Today, our guest is Justin Ayars. How's it going today?
All right. Thanks for having me.
So, would you like to start with a introduction of what you're focused on these days?
Sure. I usually start off by saying I'm a recovering healthcare trial lawyer. I used to defend insurance companies in the DMV region before the Great Recession told all the young attorneys to go do something else. I still use my law degree every day, even though I'm not in court like I used to be. And that's critical thinking skills, communication, etc. Been a 15-year serial entrepreneur in the project I have now and have been working on for some time with some incredible people and partners across the country. It's called the Quality MD. And we are a tech-enabled healthcare and prescription fulfillment platform designed to serve the underserved LGBTQ community and allies across the country. And we've soft-launched our telehealth product early this year, and we're gearing up for a larger, more robust launch as we continue to raise money and have the resources to be there for our community at a time where in recent weeks we found that we need to come together more intentionally as a community. And I think that this conversation is very poignant given recent events, perhaps more so than a year ago.
Wow, thank you. So, how did you get into this?
Accidentally. The lawyers are called, that piece of paper there says I'm a counselor at law.
Mhm.
Lawyers are counselors at life. And people who are lawyers get asked questions about anything from my wife's leaving me, I'm up for promotion, I got a DUI, and you're asked whether you want the people to ask you or not. But the one question, and I've done a lot of traveling across the country, speaking with everyone from executives of Fortune 500 companies and how they can be more inclusive in their outreach efforts to LGBTQ consumers, to volunteers at rural organizations. And these questions keep coming, but the one common thread across all walks of life, across every state in the country I've heard, the one question has been, where, as an LGBTQ individual, can I find a doctor who makes me feel safe? And I kept hearing it over the years. When the pandemic hit, I had another company, a consumer behavioral data analytics company that measured how we as a consumer base behave, we as in meaning LGBTQ plus community, that had emerged out of a marketing and media company called Q Media. And that sort of went belly up because the pandemic hit and suddenly people were thinking healthcare. That was top of mind for the whole world. So the question of where can I find a doctor that makes me feel sick kept ringing in my head louder and louder. And I thought, God damn it, I got to go back to healthcare now. Because over the time between practicing law as a defense attorney for healthcare insurance companies, I had been building and nurturing vast networks built on authentic relationships. And in a sense, been building the framework for Quality MD upon a foundation of trust and authenticity without even meaning to, just by showing up, being my authentic self and giving first. And so in a way, I felt I had both an opportunity to solve a generational problem of discrimination in healthcare, but also somewhat of a social obligation in that I have networks and my team has networks that add to the value that I do that maybe others don't, and access to individuals and organizations where we can make a significant impact without having to spend a bazillion dollars.
It's interesting to hear about your journey and all the different things you've been involved in. And I think also, before we started this conversation, you mentioned something that I realized, but you said that you started the Richmond Chamber of Commerce?
So my first venture outside of practicing law was a coffee shop in Colonial Williamsburg. I went to undergrad at William and Mary
Okay.
and studied abroad at Cambridge at Christ College in UK, fell in love with UK. In between undergrad and law school, I was a history teacher at a naval boarding school. I think that experience, living in a boarding house and with 71 boys, I'm surprised I'm not guilty of 71 counts of murder. But that really prepared me for law and life.
Mhm.
When we sold the coffee shop in 2011 and then opened a restaurant nightclub in Richmond, Virginia, the director of what was then the Gay Community Center, now Diversity Richmond, a gentleman named Bill Harrison, approached and he said, you seem very organized, and with your legal background, I think it'd be really beneficial for our community here in Richmond if you start an LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. Up until that point, it had been a program that had been limping along of the Gay Community Center, but hadn't really gotten any legs. So I went in and with the proverbial stick of dynamite, blew it up and started from scratch, created a 501c6 organization, built it up from one company to over 100 in less than a year, brought in 5 corporate partners, and made it one of the formal affiliate chambers of the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, known as NGLCC. And at the time, it was then called the Richmond Business Alliance, but now it's called the Richmond LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. And I'm proud to say it's going strong and well over 200 members now.
Wow. Yeah, when you keep mentioning things and it's like, oh, I started this, but also I had a coffee shop and the Q media and then the data analytics thing. Yeah, that's so much. So like what do you think has driven you to start all of these different initiatives and just to keep going?
Because I'm crazy. You got to be crazy, as I think I was sharing with you earlier, that to be an entrepreneur, you've got to have a little bit of insanity. To be a serial entrepreneur like I've been for over 15 years now on my fifth company, you got to be downright institutional. And that's okay. As long as you can understand that you're flying without a safety net, you have to have a high risk tolerance, understand that failure is not a bad word as long as you fail forward. It's important to have a strong support network around you, whether that's friends, family, loved ones, or your community. Intestinal fortitude, being able to take the gut punches, especially if you're trying to become a venture-backed business. You have to get 99 no's to get to one maybe, which will also likely be a no, just to keep going. And most sane people just don't want to engage in that, and rightfully so. But what keeps me doing it is the fact that I can see tangible results in the fact that members of the dynamically diverse LGBTQ community across various geographic regions throughout the United States, and some even international, have basically informed me how the work that I'm doing has directly or indirectly positively impacted their lives or even changed how they think about certain issues.
Hmm.
And as I mentioned, that time in between undergrad and law school teaching history, some of the most instructional moments of my life happened at that boarding school when you realize that the concept you're trying to teach to a student, whether it was a World War I or the Cold War, you see a light bulb go off. If you can see a light bulb go off in someone, it means you've reached them at some level, often a visceral level that maybe others hadn't been able to before. And when you're doing it for a community that's been so historically underrepresented and underserved for so many generations and had to endure discrimination throughout every level of society, to have an impact on that level, we're not talking about trench warfare in World War I. We're talking about navigating life's complicated journey.
Mhm.
And you can have an impact on someone, just one person, in their capacity to be their authentic selves. That's what keeps me going.
Wow. I appreciate that a lot because I'm also in tech and I go to a lot of local DC tech related things and startup things and AI things. And I hear a lot of ideas and platforms and applications and cool things
Yeah.
or things that help people be more productive, let's say. but they don't always talk about life, purpose, living your true self, being more authentic. Yeah, I don't hear that too often.
And I think that's important because the business of business is to make money.
Hmm.
Uh, President Coolidge back in the day said the business of America is business. That was, of course, during the roaring 20s when money was everything. But I
Yeah.
think that people have that in one category, business. And
Hmm.
then there's have in their mind social impact. And it's been fairly recently that those two seemingly dichotomous concepts have come together to create social impact companies. And I've always thought, based on lived experiences and observing others and doing a lot of research and such, that the most effective businesses are those that have a social impact, profits plus purpose, and being able to live in that world and interact with others who are waking up to this possibility of I just don't have to make money for the sake of making money. I can do good for a community that I'm a part of or see needs help and feel good about what I'm doing while
Hmm.
also getting a paycheck and making money for my stakeholders and investors if you have them. It's a really cool thing to do.
Awesome. I love before I started this podcast and in the early parts of the pandemic, I was like, what are online businesses in different ways? And there were a lot of teachers and people who were not so specific about the purpose. It was like, yeah, make money just to make money. I'm like, but what's the point?
Well, it's your mission and vision statement. I mean, certainly you can have them, and you should. And you put them on the wall or whatever, and you look at them every day. But if it doesn't have, if it doesn't touch you in a way that inspires you, that touches others in a way that inspires them,
Mhm.
why doing it? We only have so much time on this earth. We need to be able to enjoy what we do. Work is still work, but work can be fun if you see that you're having an impact and others appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing, and you're making money for yourself, your team, and your stakeholders.
Thank you for sharing that. So, in your journey, in your many journeys, and I guess more recently with equality, what's like a big challenge that you went into and either overcome or going to overcome soon?
Do you want it numerically or alphabetically? The challenges for any startup are the list is exhaustive. If you want to be venture backed, that's a whole other category. If you want to stay small business, then you don't need to worry about going into that ridiculous realm. I've done both. Right now, I'm in that ridiculous realm of being venture backed. But challenges have included things like when I go into a room full of investors, and to be clear, investment money still in this country is held by straight white men, typically old. That's just the nature of the world in which we live. Because I look the way I do, I can often get into rooms that others can't. But then when I open my mouth and utter the letters LGBTQ, suddenly the dynamic of the room changes dramatically.
Mm.
People shift in their chairs, they open their phones, and I'm pushed aside. Some pitches I've given, it's clear that the people in the room that I'm pitching to have not read the materials that they were provided and supposed to have read prior to. And if they had, they might not have invited me to pitch in person.
Mhm.
I had some good natured potential investors tell me afterwards, well, maybe you should go talk to your own people about this. And then I would respond saying, well, you are my people, meaning that we're all part of this entrepreneurial ecosystem, founders, tech folks, investors, and angel investors, and we're all working together to build really cool stuff. He thought I was telling him that I thought he was gay. And then he turned bright red and he said, no, your people. And when I realized what he was getting at, I said, would you tell this to a black person, to a woman, to a military veteran, to a disabled individual, basically any other? Turned bright red and walked away. I've had some people say, I'm not funding your nonprofit. They don't understand the profit and purpose marriage that can be had and are often more successful companies when you do that. That's a challenge. Then there are the general challenges of fundraising in general for those that want to raise money. Ever since Silicon Valley Bank crashed in March of 23, it's been kind of a funding winter for almost 2 years now. We're coming out of it. We're coming out of it also in very uncertain times, politically, economically, and policy-wise, as the new administration is dramatically making some changes. Certainly, there's an element of fear, rightfully so, but as I tell everybody, the two things people should do right now with involving all of this stuff is breathe, first of all, and whatever shit's coming to hit the fan, know that you're not alone, and reach out to those within your community or find communities and know that there are always options. And that's one thing that I think we as LGBTQ individuals have done very well since even before the civil rights, women's rights, and LGBTQ rights movements that really were gung-ho in the 60s and then on. It's been coming together, celebrating our differences and helping each other out. Getting back to your question, lawyers always like to loop around. The challenges have been numerous. I've made some incredibly wonderful mistakes. I've fallen flat on my face. I've run out of money. I've made bad hires. But that's what founders do, and they learn from their mistakes. Is there anything I would add, like a single mistake? No, it's a collection of learning opportunities that I've hopefully taken to create some sense of stability as we continue to move forward with this product, Equality MD.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Reminder about community. There's that creating change in this year, and a lot of it's just a weird time because there's just a lot of uncertainty and fear that's rightfully there, right? There's a lot of the words coming from the political sphere has not been kind to our community.
Right.
So to have some fear for that is really justified.
Yes.
And just thinking about what might happen next, what might not happen, what has already started to begin. And they were saying, like we've been through worse before, right? There was a time where none of us had any rights at all. And if any of us were quote unquote found out that our livelihood or families or like everything could just be wiped out immediately.
That's right.
And we made it through. Not all of us. And some people, marched and gave their lives. And we get to benefit from their work. And right now, even if things go back a little bit, it won't go all the way back.
Well, no, but I'm just going to be the lawyer just for a quick second. The 2020 decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in Bostic v. Clayton County, Georgia, said that, quote, discrimination based on homosexuality or transgender status necessarily entails discrimination based on sex. The first cannot happen without the second. In other words, sexual orientation and transgender status, any discrimination against that violates Title VII, and those protections are still in place at the Supreme Court level. Any one branch can do anything to either advance or regress social change in a positive direction or negative. When something's on the books at the U.S. Supreme Court, it's going to take a lot to overturn that. It's not like all our protections are gone, but we should be vigilant and just cognizant of what's happening, but also not doom scroll to the point where we run out pulling our hair out of fear. Because there are options, there are opportunities for us to come together as a community and navigate through this. Because in 4 years, who knows what's going to happen with the next administration.
Thank you for that. And thank you for being a lawyer.
No one's ever told me that before.
Yeah. This past holiday season, post-election, there's been more uncertainty, but it's like not even there yet. And a lot of the words I tried to tell myself was there are lawyers and organizations who are on our side, who are on the side of justice and equality, and no court cases and precedents and all this and what's already on the books. So when I see a weird news article, don't focus on that. Just wait. The people who do this, and then later on, pay attention to those groups so that, okay, this is when it's time to take action. This is when it's time to call congressperson or whoever, or even if there's a protest or rally or whatever, this is the time to do it and can do it right. So your specific reference to court case and whatever, it's super helpful.
Yeah, there are a lot of people doing a lot of great work, most of which is behind the scenes. I really think that in general, social media is a good thing, but on the whole, it's done more harm than good. And not to get on a rant about that, I really would encourage us to really dive deeper than just the headlines. If you hear a friend say something on social media that is a fact, just do your homework. Take the time to think critically and figure out what it is that's really going on. Chances are none of us will really know what's really going on because it involves so many layers and so many mechanisms, particularly when you talk about something as ridiculously huge and unnavigable as the federal government.
Yeah, I was just talking with a friend the other night, and it was like there are reputable news sources and less reputable ones, but because it's mostly online, the headline is never the truth.
Yeah,
You look at someone like, here's the context, that's never going to be in the headline. So when someone's like, here's what's happened, you start reading it and then you see the context and you're like, okay, that's not as big as you made it seem.
right.
And
Well,
then,
headlines are designed to get you to click. And that's fine, but just know that it doesn't tell the whole story. So many things are taken out of context, and the context is critical when you're talking about issues as important as ones that pertain to LGBTQ rights.
yeah. And I guess I'm going to go back to the Equality Maryland and that journey.
Quality MD,
Equality, yeah.
fantastic organization.
So used to seeing MD as Maryland being in DC. Equality
We have
MD.
a little plus next to our logo that we copyrighted, and Equality MD is copyrighted. No, we're not going after Equality MD Maryland to take their name because we value the work that they do for the citizens of Maryland and hope to work with them as well.
Awesome.
Even though people in Maryland are terrible drivers.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Of course, I'm from Virginia, so I'm supposed to say that. Growing up inside the Beltway, we always called Maryland drivers, they live in enemy territory. But
being here in DC, it's like they're all bad. And then people in Maryland say the thing about Virginia.
it's just friendly road banter.
Otherwise, how would you enjoy the traffic? How would you make it through?
Just if you see someone with a diplomatic tag, just avoid them at all costs because no matter what happens, it's your fault if you get into an accident. That was one of the first rules my mom taught me when I was 15.
Wow, wise words. In terms of community equality MD, were there any groups or programs that helped you in your journey?
Absolutely. We've gone through quite a few accelerators. As I mentioned, I've been building this company my entire life without even really knowing I was, just by building vast networks and meaningful relationships built on cultivating and nurturing relationships with individuals and organizations that are now turning into our channel distribution partners. One of the strongest we have is with the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, NGLCC. And I started that journey with them in 2012, creating Richmond's, I'd call them chapters, they call them affiliate chambers. Doesn't matter, it's just nomenclature. So the chapter in Richmond, I got involved and still involved with the national organization through their National Mentorship Committee. I served with I the only non-corporate person on a board of all these corporate individuals because at one of the conferences I raised my hand and said, some of these mentorship things aren't working. I suggest we do XYZ. And then someone said, you've been voluntold to serve on this committee, given your interesting perspectives. But some of the programs we went through included local accelerators like Lighthouse Labs in Richmond, Virginia, Unstuck Labs in Arlington. We participated in many organizations throughout the DMV region like DC Startup Week, now DC Startup and Tech Week. Rachel and Seema do a great job with that. We went through Halcyon, the social impact residential accelerator program in Georgetown just in last spring. So February through May of 24. We were their first class that they focused specifically on healthcare. That was very exciting. I went through Rock Health as an innovation fellow at an organization in San Francisco, Startup Health, Scale Health, and the big one, Cedars-Sinai Accelerator in Los Angeles, lived in LA for a year. Over 1,200 companies across the world apply. They take 10 every year. And we were one of them in 2023, came out of that just December 2023. And the other organizations that we work with that are part of our community, let me go back. NGLCC, their LGBT Business Enterprise certification is fantastic. And it's gotten even more fantastic since a friend of mine, Sean Franklin, is now helping find opportunities for, even create opportunities for LGBT business enterprise certified companies across the country, which there are over 4,000 now. And that's because LGBTQ is not recognized at the federal level as a minority community. So this is the certification that allows opportunities for LGBTBEs, business enterprises, to have access to corporations and their supplier diversity initiatives. Through them, we were able to work with Boston Scientific, with Shell Energy, with MC Entertainment, and more dramatically with Capital One. I went through their 6-month Catapult program. With CBS, they had me participate in a week-long program at their headquarters in Rhode Island, where I got to pitch Equality MD to their senior executives, which was incredible. And with United Health Group, we spent 7 months doing a targeted marketing and data science research project with them, where they effectively told us one of the reasons that discrimination in healthcare has persisted for our community for generations is a lack of data about how we as a patient population behave as a patient population. Because of discrimination, we're not really willing to raise our hands and say, yes, I identify with this community because I don't want my doctor treating me unfairly. And that lack of data has led to a decreased patient engagement, worse patient outcomes. And this cycle keeps getting worse and worse as the lack of data persists. It's like medical studies that use data from the past 60, 70 years, but actively exclude minority communities. So you can run it through AI all you want, but if that data still is missing, it's bad data you're getting spit out. So it's LGBTQ status, specifically SOGI data, sexual orientation, gender identity, and intersectionality of that with other health disparity populations that include social determinants of health issues that you need to be cognizant of when you talk about LGBTQ, because we do represent every demographic, from racial minorities to military veterans. It's important to be able to capture that data, and that's another thing we're doing at an institutional level, because we don't trust healthcare entities, and why would we? They can't capture that data. They can't build companies like Equality MD if they don't have the trust of the community. Whereas we can, and over time, anonymize the data, HIPAA compliant, of course, so that we can sell it back to insurance companies, to health systems, to pharmaceutical companies. And they can better understand how we behave as a patient population, what our needs are, how to engage us authentically, so that over time, we as a community can change how we perceive what healthcare even means. 1 in 3 in our community experience discrimination in a clinical setting, causing 1 in 4 to avoid care altogether. 1 in 6 are denied care, and 1 in 8 live in states where doctors can legally deny care, and 1 in 5 experience discrimination from insurance companies. Wow. So we're hoping that through our telehealth platform, we can solve an immediate need that's been there for generations, but in the long term, capture valuable new data that can help drive institutional reforms and advance health equity at scale in ways that other companies just aren't doing.
I definitely appreciate that a lot. So where things are now, the platform, can people start signing up to it? And are there limitations in terms of like location, or who can sign up and be a part of it?
Great question. If you are over 18 and you have a heartbeat, you can sign up. We are in all 50 states for a low monthly subscription. We don't take insurance because 60% of our community are uninsured or underinsured. Our monthly subscription is significantly cheaper than almost every insurance plan. When you factor in premiums, deductibles, co-pays, and fighting with insurance companies, you can get, for a low monthly subscription, 36 virtual visits per year. That's split between 12 full mental health sessions, that's 50-minute sessions, 12 primary care sessions, 12 urgent care sessions, and includes our pharmacy program. We have 2 pharmacies in-house and are able to provide our members exclusive access to over 1,000 of the nation's most prescribed medications, which includes PrEP. And if you have a specialty medication or urgent care medication that you need right now, we have a prescription benefit card that gets you up to 80% discounts on that medication at over 70,000 pharmacies nationwide.
Wow. Okay. And the website would be
QualityMD.com.
awesome.
All of our providers, and this is key, they've all gone through LGBTQ cultural competency training. And we were able to do a massive study, the largest in America's history, of LGBT patients, over 32,000. And we did that in partnership with Cedars-Sinai, UC Berkeley, and the National Research Corporation. It took 5 months. And that informed how we would structure our business model, informed how we would go to market, and what the needs of our community are, because the community told us. We're not building something that we think people will like. We built something that the community has said they need. 80% of our community says mental health is their primary healthcare concern. We made that a priority. A vast majority say that they don't have a primary care physician. And we want to make sure that that is addressed. And a lot of that stems from fear of reprisals or discriminatory actions taken by clinicians based on past experience, perceived potential discrimination, or just hearing bad stories from friends and family who've had experiences of their own. So having this available and knowing that the providers you handpick, and the telehealth law requires the doctor you see have a license in your state. We do providers in all 50 states, but you get to pick the provider you want. You can change them anytime, or if you want continuity of care, you can stick with that provider. No premiums, no deductibles, no copays, no fighting with insurance companies for a low monthly subscription, 36 virtual visits per year, and virtually any medication you might need, with some few exceptions, are all included. And those that aren't included are a nominal fee, $5 or $10. And that's a huge, huge plus for our community at a time when so much of our healthcare infrastructure is up in the air, shall we say.
Okay. That sounds amazing. We'll definitely have links in the show notes so people can learn more and explore for themselves.
And to the question that usually comes after that. So your telehealth, what happens if I need to see someone in person? I'm trying to anticipate the questions you're going to ask, because that I get that a lot. And that's a good question. 70% of all healthcare needs can be addressed via telehealth. But sometimes you just got to go in and see someone. If you break your wrist, you need an x-ray. We can't help you with that. But we are working with great organizations like GLMA, used to stand for the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association, and it's a national network that's been around since, I think, 1981, of LGBTQ and LGBTQ affirming clinicians across the country, working with organizations like Centerlink that has 378 LGBTQ community centers across the country that serve our community. And we're able to also establish partnerships with small clinic groups, concierge medicine groups, and we're expanding those networks so that when you do need to see someone in person, because eventually you will, we want to make sure that we are able to refer you to someone somewhere within your geographic region that you know will be able to deliver the same type of LGBTQ care that you receive on our platform. But once you do leave our platform, you are on your own in terms of paying for it. So our telehealth platform is great for those without insurance, those who are unemployed, those gig workers or fractional employees who don't get insurance from their employers, which is a lot of people, and those who have insurance but might want to supplement their insurance because they don't like the in-network doctor that they're assigned. And we found that with our MVP, 20% of our patients were straight women who did not care for their doctors they were assigned because they often dismissed them. And it's just embarrassing that that still is the case. But we happily accept anybody who wants to receive culturally competent care, even if they don't necessarily identify with our community, like some of the women in our MVP. They feel safer with doctors who've gone through that training because they have a better bedside manner and true empathy, because they're able to create that safe space in which anyone in our community can be their authentic self.
I love that connection point so much because sometimes people assume when we're making things more equitable or accessible or safe for our community, that it's just about us. When you make it safer for minority communities, you actually end up making it safer for wider communities as well.
That's right. Well, and just look at as we briefly talked about some of the civil rights movement, women's rights, LGBTQ rights. Without allies, LGBTQ wouldn't be where we are. Without non-African American individuals, civil rights wouldn't be where they are. Without men, women wouldn't be. I mean, we all have worked together because we believe in equality and opportunity. And so, absolutely, I would laugh our company out of the room if we excluded anybody. The only folks we don't serve are those under 18, just because of legal and regulatory surrounding that. And as a startup, it's just not a good business move. But we can still refer people to wonderful organizations that serve LGBTQ youth, trans youth, and they're great nonprofits out there doing incredible things. And so even our competitors, and there are only really two, Folks and Plume, I think the world of both of them. They do fabulous work serving transgender patients. That represents 4% of the broader LGBTQ sort of pie, if you want to. It's a small sliver, but they do incredible work. And if we ever receive a trans patient that needs more attention, their needs outweigh, we can't satisfy their needs, we will absolutely refer them to one of our colleagues. I don't see them as competitors, I see them as colleagues. And one of the organizations, I've spoken with their CEO, one of the other two, have said that they get some non-trans patients and they're not able to aptly serve their needs, and they want to refer patients like that to us. So I really think that by working together in the private sector, like the three of us are, Equality MD, Plume, and Folks, and sort of the public sector, the nonprofit arena, we can really elevate our community by working together. And so it's not about trying to outdo the other entity. It's by finding ways in which we can partner together to help each other so that as few people fall through the cracks as possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I don't know, in some ways, isn't that the goal, right? It's like, hey, we're all part of it. Like, let's go.
Yeah, I've had some investors say, wait, why are you calling these two companies that operate in your space colleagues? They're competition? And I said, yeah, they're colleagues. I like them. I respect them. They do fantastic work. Why would I ever say anything bad about them? And investors are just blown away because they don't normally hear that kind of stuff. But then again, they don't normally see profits plus purpose companies come to their table.
And on one side, part of me is like, those investors. And on another side, I'm like, I'm glad you're there saying this, because then those investors may start to see things in a better way.
That's my hope too.
Resources can go in, more purposeful directions.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Is there anything else that I should have asked about Equality MD before we move to the
Just that the right now we're offering introductory pricing. It's a smoking hot deal. I'm not just saying that because I'm trying to sell it. It kept the price low. One of the studies we did in this massive 36,000 patient population survey was how much would you pay for a company like Equality MD, listed the types of things we were going to offer. Now we're focusing on primary care, urgent care, and mental health as sort of a package because that's what the community said the needs were most pressing. Now, certainly we're going to be adding things like dermatology, endocrinology, and eventually family care. We will eventually bring on opportunities for same-sex couples with kids to come on for a reduced rate. And prices will increase, but we'll keep it within the margins that allow us to be profitable and continue to serve our community, but also are affordable and are cheaper than the managed healthcare system that we currently live in, which entails insurance companies, health systems, hospitals, and pharmaceutical companies. And it's no secret, but they all work together to drive up prices for healthcare. And there's tons of middlemen, lots of overhead, and we've eliminated all of it to be able to keep prices down. And that's important for us because we don't want people spending more than they need to for the care they deserve with dignity and respect.
I like that. And thinking about the idea of purpose just as a big whole, that sort of as this overall thing leads into this next question. Question I ask everyone is when it comes to our LGBTQ plus community, what is a vision you have for like our next step?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I saw that in the prompt for this meeting, and I've been sort of thinking about it the past couple of days. Uh, I often call myself, when you write applications for funding or grants or school or anything, they have statements, tell me about yourself. And I was writing the same bullshit all the time, and it just got old. And I thought, oh, I've gone to these schools, I've won these awards, and yawn. So what I like to say now is that I have the mind of a philosopher, the heart of a poet, and the spirit of a starship captain. In all that I do, curiosity is my North Star. And in that vein, to answer a question of sort of next steps and how to, for the expansive LGBTQ plus community, I think of things, I see life as change. I see the universe as balance. And I think that we as a community must harmonize these two seemingly dichotomous concepts. And to do so, I'm reminded of one of my favorite philosophers, not to go too deep, Henry David Thoreau, the transcendentalist American philosopher. And from his idea of living intentionally, I've broken that down into sort of 5 categories, and that's listen actively. We all have different voices and different perspectives. For the love of God, just close your mouth, open your ears, and hear what the other side has to say. Uh, Difference of opinion, diversity of thought is essential to the diversity within our community.
Mhm.
Think critically. Don't to judgments or conclusions. When you listen actively, you might hear perspectives you might not have heard otherwise. That may inform, it may alter how you see things, how you see yourself, and be able to think critically about what you see and what you experience so that when you do have something to add to the conversation, you communicate effectively. Communicate succinctly, respectfully, and take into account the audience. Always know your audience. Act intentionally. And that means don't just do something because someone else is doing it, know why you're doing it. By acting intentionally, your actions will have more consequences and hopefully more positive consequences because you have been listening actively, thinking critically, and communicating effectively. And finally, live deliberately. And that sort of brings all of those 4 concepts together. By listening actively, thinking critically, communicating effectively, and acting intentionally, you'll live a deliberate life and people will respect you more, you'll respect yourself more, and you'll be closer to understanding who you are and how you navigate this earth. And that we'll never fully understand that question, but it'll help you get closer to it. And it requires real work. And with these uncertain times, it's important that we celebrate the diversity within our community, as I mentioned, including diversity of thought, so that we can collectively advance our understanding of ourselves and increase our respect for each other, and aspire to achieve the dreams so that we have a positive, lasting impact on society and future generations. That's probably a more lengthy response than you normally get.
It is.
But I really want to, double click on that, and it just starts by closing your mouth and listening, if nothing else, and just hearing perspectives. It's even from the other side of the aisle, if you will. That's probably more important than anything, because as Patrick Henry said, I disagree with what you have to say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. That's why we allow all types of parades on Constitution Avenue, from Black Lives Matter to Ku Klux Klan. It's insane, but it's America, and we need to be able to have that types of freedom. It goes back to the Constitution.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it sounds crazy. Yet at the same time, I think there are people who may actively vote against us
Mm-hmm.
who don't realize what that really means or looks like. And part of that is because they haven't heard us share, and some of us haven't made space to listen to them.
Yeah.
And there is a balance of taking care of ourselves and making sure that we're able to be in certain spaces. Not everyone can sit and listen to some of the people who talk, but I do think that finding ways to see what's in common and find ways to come to the table with, okay, can we all just have human dignity? Okay, cool. Human life is important. Human dignity is important. Respect is important. Okay, now let's have a conversation.
Mm.
That keeps in line with that.
And of course, not everyone is going to agree on everything. That's not life. That's not how it works. That's not even, we wouldn't be a country if that were the case.
I mean, we wouldn't even be friends. Like there are a few friends who agree on everything.
Right. But being able to disagree civilly, and even if someone's opinion goes against the very heart and soul of who you are, have some level of respect for them, even just as a human being. Because no matter what is going on up here or in here for that other individual, they're still a human being. And that's something that I think gets lost, particularly in social media, when people can espouse hate without having any repercussions or by hiding behind an avatar.
It was That's true. A small follow-up question. Do you have any tips to help remind us of other people's humanity in some of those spaces where, let's say, someone has a way of just being super extreme and it's hard to see. You don't see that humanity by default. Do
Yeah.
you have any like just little tips to help to
Yeah,
see?
this sort of goes back to my idea that the best education anyone can receive is a passport full of stamps, as early as you can, as often as you can. It doesn't matter where you go, just go. Because when you go to another country and you live in another culture, even if just for a couple of weeks, you start hearing how others perceive America and how, by de facto, whether you want to or not, you're a cultural ambassador for America. I remember I studied abroad in Australia in 2003, and I was at Australian National University, and I was asked, "Why did you invade Iraq?" And I said, "I didn't." And then I said, "My president did. I didn't vote for George W. Bush, but he still was my president." And that was a very interesting conversation. I was yelled at. But the point I'm trying to make with all of that is little things we can do include putting ourselves in situations that make us uncomfortable and slowly becoming comfortable being uncomfortable. And that goes for what we were just talking about with conversation with people who you might think is they're an idiot, they're an asshole or whatever. Listen to them. Force yourself to without reacting. And then maybe take some time to digest and think, well, maybe this aspect of their life that I don't know about, because we can't pretend to walk in their shoes or live their life or have their experiences. Maybe they're doing this. Maybe they had an event that I don't know about that is helping inform why they think they do. Be inquisitive, ask questions, but in a polite way. And certainly if the other person isn't responding in kind, then you can politely excuse yourself, because then a shouting match doesn't get anyone anywhere. But I just have that sense of innate respect, and that includes respect for yourself. Attempt to be the better person, attempt to take the high road. And not all attempts will work, but the fact that you're doing it and if you practice doing it, you'll get better over time, hearing and respecting opinions that are not shared by you or your peers. And that's I think important, to be able to understand the differing sides of any particular issue.
Yeah, and that's helpful.
It's hard. It's hard. So I wouldn't maybe necessarily, if you were a hard Kamala person, go straight to a Trump rally. Maybe that's a bit extreme, but listen on occasion. Hear what's being said, hear what's not being said.
Mhm.
It's I could go on forever, but it's just put yourself in situations that you know you're going to be uncomfortable and do your best to be comfortable in them.
And now on a slightly different note. Next question. 2025 is here, and here in DC, we're hosting World Pride. So I've been asking people, what do you think of when you think of Pride? So you can be thinking of the word and concept, or you can be thinking of the event and spaces. But when you think of Pride, what do you think of, Justin?
I My first Pride was DC. I was 16. It was a certain year, and it was a lot of fun just to be able to go out on Pennsylvania Avenue and walk up and down between the White House and Capitol and not have to worry about who I was or figuring out who I was at the time. This was in the 90s, and so it was a different time then too. Uh, yes, the Clintons were in office, but so was Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So marriage equality was far from on anyone's radar, and it was just a different time. So Pride to me, I always conjure memories of that, as well as other prides I've been to around the world: London, Amsterdam, Berlin, Australia, Sydney, San Francisco, LA, San Diego, Miami. There've been so many prides I've been to, and they're all different. Some of the most fun are very rural prides where maybe there are 20 people because it's the same spirit, but just it it's a different feeling, and it's all community, but community has all different types of levels and meanings depending on where you are geographically. And so pride to me, it sometimes there aren't words. Obviously, you're going to hear things like community, connectivity, diversity, inclusivity. All those are absolutely true for me too. Um, then at the same time, I had to work a lot of Pride booths with our marketing and media company. And to me, for a little bit of time, Pride meant, God damn it, I got to sit in the hot sun with no air conditioner, trying to hand out magazines and paraphernalia for my business. I don't want to, if I ever see another rainbow flag in the rest of my life, I'll be happy. And of course, after I had a few good nights sleep, those feelings passed. But that's just the nature of working. But I think for World Pride, because I was fortunate enough to go to World Pride in New York in 2019, just before all the COVID craziness and lockdowns happened, I got to speak at the Lincoln Center. That was really cool about LGBTQ marketing and media and how inclusivity can really drive economic change. And got to meet some incredible folks, and it was massive. 50th anniversary of Stonewall, World Pride. I mean, it was the pride to be at, in my opinion, the biggest one I've ever been to. Just the pure elation that everyone had on every street corner, from high school kids to grandmas. And it was just beautiful. And to be a part of that was something truly special. I can't wait for DC Pride this year.
It's gonna be big, and DC will be ready. That's a manifestation. Part of me is like, I don't know if they will be, but we'll figure it out.
Just
And
keep those metros running.
the metros will be running, and they will be having many, 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 many volunteers and many, many, many different businesses getting in, and
Yeah.
it's going to be a good time.
And I tip my hat to anyone who's volunteering for this event because it's for DC, it's going to be once in a lifetime. And thank you in advance to everybody who's taking time to volunteer to make this event a safe event and emotionally fulfilling and just a jubilation of the time for everybody.
It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good.
Yeah,
All right. So final set of questions. These are sort of rapid fire, but probably not. But okay. So you ready?
sure.
Okay. So what is something that inspires you and why?
You're gonna think I'm gonna be a big old dork for this. Star Trek.
Fair.
I like Star Trek a lot. I watch some of it almost every day. It's been around since September 8th, 1966. But the reason I like it, it's not just because it's science fiction, it's the idea behind it. The idea behind it is infinite diversity and infinite possibilities. That's a quote from the creator of it, Gene Roddenberry. When Star Trek debuted in 66, there was a lot going on in the world. A small thing called the Cold War. We'd recently bombed Japan twice, had some internment camps, not our brightest moment as a nation. Civil rights were a very big issue then. And so what did Gene Roddenberry do? He pictured the most diverse group of individuals he could at that time and put them as equals on the bridge starship exploring the galaxy together. Captain Kirk, the white guy, Scotty, this crazy Scott in the engineering room, Sulu driving the ship, Japanese American, who was himself as not the actor. The actor himself was living as a child in a Japanese internment camp. Chekhov, a Russian, who we were in Cold War with as a weapons officer, Spock, an alien, and then Lieutenant Uhura, African American woman. And there's this great story about how her passion was Broadway. She wanted to go do a Broadway and be a Broadway dancer and singer. And she was very, very talented. And so she went to Roddenberry and gave her resignation after season one. And that was a Friday. And he said, all right, well, you need to go to this convention and meet your biggest fan. And he put the letter of resignation in his desk. And it turns out her biggest fan was Martin Luther King Jr. And when she met him, he said, I love Star Trek. It's amazing. It's the only show that Cred and I let our kids stay up late to watch. And she said, oh, I'm leaving Star Trek. He said, no, you're not. And she said, why? And he said, don't you know what Gene Roddenberry is trying to do? How he is advancing civil rights? He has put you as an equal on the bridge of this enterprise in people's living rooms every week. And he says, that's advancing civil rights in many ways as much as I am. You have an obligation to stay. So she went back on Monday and Roddenberry handed her her torn up resignation letter. And she said, I had no idea what you were doing. And he said, now you get it. So what inspires me is Star Trek because it reminds me of what we can do when we come together and celebrate our differences.
Thank you for sharing that. I had not heard that story before. And yeah, that's inspiring. And just like similar to what you're doing with your platform and being like, here's how we can do profit and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And people with their art can say, here's how we can make a good show that's entertaining and has a story, but also the purpose behind it.
Absolutely. You're connecting the dots. I didn't, yeah, exactly. You can do the same thing in art, TV, business. And if you're living intentionally and deliberately, as I mentioned, you can do these things. And it comes across as well received by hopefully popular culture.
Yeah. And that's what been around for 56, almost 60 years now.
It's 1966, the longest running sci-fi series in history, one of the most successful franchises. Yet Star Wars makes more money, yes, but it's simple. It's about light, dark, good, evil, father, son. It's fun. I like it, but it doesn't go deep like Star Trek does.
Okay. All right. So next rapid fire question. Okay, so do you have a favorite self-care routine or activity?
I used to. I haven't been so good about it recently. I used to really enjoy waking up and going to the gym just to stay active because when you sleep better, you maintain healthier BMI, weight balance, clears your mind. And I haven't been doing that recently, candidly, and that's caused some consternation internally. I'm not sleeping as well. That I'm under a lot of stress. So you would think logically, if I followed my own goddamn advice, I would get my ass up and go to the gym, but I haven't. But what I've stopped doing is snacking, and that's helped. So I used to really enjoy it. When I was teaching history in England, I even had a weight training class. I started it more for myself than anyone, but the kids got involved too, and seeing them get excited about it made me more excited about it. And that sort of reminded me that resistance training and cardiovascular training, and doing these types of things are not only healthy, but really help clear your mind and focus your mind. And when your mind is clear and healthy, your body will follow.
Okay. And nice. So, next question is, do you have a favorite joke?
I do, and it's one my mom told me about my family history. So I was raised in show business, born in Vegas. Liberace's my godfather. Truth is always stranger than fiction. So my dad's a freaking musical genius, and he's played with everyone, friends with the Rat Pack, did 7 albums with Barbra Streisand, and toured the country with Elvis for years. In November of '72, way before my time, Liberace stole my dad from Elvis, who was at the time playing keyboard and organ for Elvis. And I have photos to back all this up. And when Liberace found out he was a musical arranger and conductor and had studied at Oberlin and the Mozarteum in Austria, he spoke fluent German. Uh, Liberace said, "I need this man." And they had from then, a 13-year dynamic duo relationship. My dad was the Robin to Liberace's Batman. And together, that during those 13 years, Liberace had more fame and fortune than he ever had in his life. It was truly his right-hand man. And so when my mom talks about that, because people think, why would anyone leave Elvis Presley? And my mom said, well, honey, your father went from working from the king to the queen.
Nice. That's it's amazing. And just like, you never know where questions will lead. And it's definitely none of that was on my radar in terms of what we talk about today.
Well, as I said, truth is always stranger than fiction.
Wow, wow. King to the queen. Love that. And I also love a joke that just has more story and just like narrative connection pieces in it. Okay, two more questions. So, who is a queer change maker that inspires you?
Um, that's a good one because there are a lot, and a lot of them are younger these days and a little more comfortable expressing themselves in ways that I don't. And that goes back to embracing our diversity. I don't necessarily personally lead introductions with people with, hi, I'm gay, my name's Justin, and I have this company. For me, I see my sexual orientation as a part of me, just like I have blue eyes and like Star Trek. But it's a part of me I also can't ignore the way I used to when I was younger. So I think for one thing that just makes me smile is the relationship that Patrick Stewart, no Star Trek here, but when he played, obviously he was Jean-Luc Picard on Next Generation, but his friendship with Sir Ian McClellan, who's openly gay, officiated Patrick Stewart's wedding. They are the best of friends. And when they were on Graham Norton, the British comedian, he's very openly gay, and he's just hysterical. To see Patrick Stewart and Ian McClellan just share pure love for each other, I find that inspiring. And a lot of that goes back to just who they are, but also something that I never experienced. And I never did much of theater. I'm not much of a theater gay. My brother is, and part of me feels like I missed out on some of that. But just seeing that it's fun because it reminds me that no matter where you come from, that if you're your authentic self, you can have those types of relationships and inspire others to find out who they are, whatever that may be.
Now, final question of the show. Do you have a piece of advice or guiding word of wisdom that has been helpful for you and or that you'd like to share with others?
Uh, I would just say believe in yourself. That sounds cliche, kind of in a way, unless it's not. We are so capable of so many wonderful things as individuals and as communities. When things, we're our own worst critics, all of us, and we fault ourselves for things that others praise us for. We're never quite good enough. We don't quite live up to our own expectations. I would encourage all of us to be kinder to ourselves. Now, don't be a slacker and think that the world owes you something. The world doesn't owe you anything. You have to earn your way through life. The only thing that you're really owed is just the dignity and respect as a human being. But beyond that, you have to do things. Actions speak louder than words. Go out into the world and don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to fail. And fail is not a bad thing. You've got to fail forward, have a support network, but just believe in yourself and go out and do something. And it doesn't matter what it is. Maybe it's applying for school, maybe it's applying for a job, maybe it's asking someone out on a date that you think might be a little higher than whatever you think your standards are. But just go out there and give it a risk. And again, try to be a little bit uncomfortable being uncomfortable. That doesn't just pertain to conversations, that pertains to being an entrepreneur, pertains to romantic relationships, personal relationships, or even issues like walking out of the house if you're agoraphobic, crossing the street. It's just believe in yourself and don't be afraid to take chances as long as they're calculated, reasonable, and don't put you in any danger.
Well, thank you so much for not only sharing those words, but sharing your story and stories and your platform and what you're doing to help not just our community, but communities outside of us. And yeah, conversation went in different directions and there were like lots of little nuggets that popped in and out. And thank you so much.
Well, it's been a pleasure. If I can just help people change how they perceive what healthcare means and make it more accessible to a community that has a history of generations of discrimination, then I've done my job. And I thank you for allowing me to share the story and be on your podcast. And I know that DC Pride's coming up, so I wish you a very happy early Pride.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Queer Changemakers. This is Justin, and I hope you are able to get some inspiration and maybe some ideas about how you can take action to create positive change in your life, communities, and beyond. See you next time.